Is trading down the plan for Jason Licht and the Bucs when it comes to the first round? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. No better time than right now, right ahead of the draft, to become an insider. This episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in this show. So Fox Sports dropped a piece naming the perfect first-round fit for every NFL team, and we tackle another mock draft that dropped recently. But let's start this thing off with Jason Licht and some comments that he made when he spoke with the media, and those comments tie perfectly into a late mailbag question that I got from one of the insiders. But we start with Jason Licht and his being asked about trading in this upcoming draft. Now, you guys know that I'm all about trading down from 19 in basically 99% of scenarios. And we know that Jason has a propensity to trade down when presented with the opportunity. But it seems as though he believes that this year will be a little tougher to make deals than in years past. Now, I've said for months that the elite talent in this draft is very few, while the really, really good starting caliber talent is very deep. That's what's going to make it so hard to make trades, at least in the first round. So unless you're in the top 10 and in a position to offer up the chance for one of those elite guys to go to your team, you're going to have a hard time selling the fact that a team can't get similar talent at their own pick as they could while trading into your pick. So it seems as though Jason Licht does kind of feel the same way. When he was asked about whether or not he's more open to trading down this year specifically, Licht said, quote, "I don't know about more. There have been years where I've thought about it more than others. It just kind of depends on how things fall. You can't walk into it saying, I am definitely looking to trade back, because you don't know what's going to fall to you. I do think this year is going to be, and I could be wrong, you're going to see maybe a little less people maybe wanting to move up and offering enough to make it worth your while, just because the draft is pretty leveled out at a certain point. You might be able to get the same level of player in the second round as you can in the fourth round at certain positions. So I think you'll maybe see a little bit less of that," end quote. This is the issue here. Unless you can get a team that desperately wants to jump ahead of Pittsburgh to potentially draft Jackson Dart, then you're likely not going to be moving down in this draft. Now, things can get crazy immediately, so you could see a run on a certain position and a team not want to miss out, and that could kind of force their hand of trying to move up and offer you enough to make it worth it. Or you could see a team want to jump up for, say, Colston Loveland, the tight end for Michigan, once Tyler Warren is gone. There's a lot of different situations where a team may want to make a move, but it just seems unlikely in the first round of this draft because of the limited number of elite players available. Now, of course, the Bucs also have the chance to take one or two of those elite players because of the position they play. And I've talked about that a lot over the course of the last week. Jahad Campbell, Malachi Starks, they are in that category of elite talent. And there are going to be players that are not as good at their specific positions as Campbell and Starks are at theirs. So if one of those elite players fall in your lap and a team tries to move up to get them, is it worth passing on them to gain more picks. And that's what's so tough. I think you would wind up looking back, whether you're Jason Licht, Todd Bowles, those of you listening or watching the show, I think you would wind up looking back and seeing the Bucs pass on Campbell in favor of an extra day 2 pick, and you would wind up disappointed a few years down the road. At the same time, I think you would be far more willing to live with doing exactly that in the case of Starks. And the reason I say that is because with Antoine Winfield Jr. already on the back end, you're going to be better off with another pick or two. And, you can grab a linebacker, you can grab an edge rusher, or you can grab a receiver, while you also get a guy like Lathan Ransom or Xavier Watts or Andrew Makuba. So don't get me wrong, Starks is still better than those players, but I think having a guy like Campbell there for you to be your anchor in the middle of the defense for the next decade is more valuable than the addition of Starks at the safety position. But what about other rounds? Is that where we're going to see a little more of the action with teams making moves on days 2 and 3? Well, insider Ricky reached out and said, do you think Spytek and Licht pull off a trade at some point in this draft? I don't think they're walking into this with the plan to make a trade already. It's pretty much impossible to do that when you don't know what players are going to be there when you're on the clock. Now, will it be easier for those two guys to get a deal worked out quickly than it will be with other teams? Absolutely. They know each other. They trust each other. But the problem lies in the fact that, they also know what kind of players the other is looking for. And they're going to be interested in a lot of the same guys. The Raiders have needs up and down both sides of the ball. So players that the Bucs are interested in are also going to be players that the Raiders are interested in, and vice versa. However, the Raiders picking ahead of the Bucs means that, the Raiders have the advantage of taking some of these similar players. That's going to make it harder for one of those teams to give their pick to the other because it might be for the same prospect. Now, the Bucs are clearly not going to make a move up to get to number 6. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason to sacrifice what little draft capital you have. So if I'm taking a look at what picks the Bucs have and what picks the Raiders have, where do I think it's most likely that a deal ends up getting done? I think if they do get a deal done, it's likely going to be the Raiders trying to jump up from the next round into the Bucs' current pick rather than the Bucs trying to move up for the Raiders pick. I would look at something like the Raiders offering up picks 108 and 180 for the Bucs' third round pick at 84. That in turn would give the Bucs picks 19, 57, 108, 121, 157, 180, and 235. Honestly, I'm not sure that gaining pick 180 is worth only having 2 picks in the first 2 days. You could see the Bucs maybe move out of 157 in exchange for 180 and 213. But again, I'm not sure it's worth it to lose your 5th round pick in order to pick in the 6th and the 7th. So I think we will see some trades between these two over time. But unless Spytek calls up Jason Licht and says, look, I really want Rachaad White. I need a running back. I'm not loving what I'm seeing right now. I'll give you this pick. You give me Rachaad White in a contract year, or, hey, send me Jamel Dean. I know you want to draft a corner. You already drafted a corner, whatever the case may be. I need some help in the secondary. You send me Jamel. I'll send you this pick. Then it's one of those deals could get done over draft weekend, but I just don't know that these two are lined up well enough to actually get a deal done strictly based on draft picks, especially with the Bucs only having 6 picks to begin with, the Raiders only having 6 inside the top 200. The Raiders having picks 213, 215, and 222. That's not really going to go very far for them in these trade negotiations. Ben Arthur names every team's best fit in round 1. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we are taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Buccaneers forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut player of the week is Jahdae Barron. With his speed, his intelligence, and his abilities to make plays on the ball, he's a heavy-duty addition to Todd Bowles' defense and this Buccaneers secondary, which he can elevate to one of the most feared units in the NFL. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Jahdae Barron could do here. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So Ben Arthur of Fox Sports went through every pick of the first round and identified every team's best fit that they can take. There were some of the obvious choices. Cam Ward to Tennessee, Shedeur Sanders to Cleveland, Travis Hunter to Jacksonville. But with the Buccaneers, Arthur listed their biggest need as edge rusher and said the best fit is edge rusher from Marshall, Mike Green. Now, he had Abdul Carter to Carolina, Mykel Williams to Atlanta, Shamar Stewart to Cincinnati. So Green was his top available edge rusher for the Bucs pick. Arthur said, quote, the Bucs could use outside pass rush help beyond Hassan Reddick, who missed several games last season as a holdout with the Jets. Green led the FBS with 17 sacks in 2024. All right, here's my problem with this, and it has nothing to do with Mike Green as a player. I made my case about that on the last show. I'm not going to harp on it. I said if the Bucs get Green, I understand it. I get it. It just makes me a little bit nervous. But as far as this list is concerned, here's my problem with the fit of Green and the Bucs. Edge rusher is not the Bucs' biggest need. Yes, they do absolutely need one in this draft. No one is denying that. I am not coming on here and saying that edge rusher is set for the Buccaneers. However, linebacker and corner are bigger needs than edge at this stage. In this scenario, he had Jahdae Barron going to the Saints, but he didn't have Jahad Campbell anywhere in the first round. And that shows what I've continued to harp about, how Jahad Campbell's an elite prospect, and he could fall in the Bucs' lap because of the position he plays. Off-ball linebacker is the running back of the defense. Teams just don't take those guys in the first round. Now, running back is starting to move their way back into that conversation and that situation, but he didn't have Jahad Campbell at all in the first round. Didn't have any team's biggest need being linebacker. Safety, honestly, is arguably a bigger need right now today than edge rusher is. And Starks went last in this situation to the Eagles because Arthur gave the Dolphins Nick Emenwari. He had Will Johnson, who I said my piece on, and I don't want the Bucs to draft, but he had Will Johnson going 24th to Minnesota. He had Maxwell Hairston, 26th to the Rams. Azariah Thomas going 30th to Buffalo. The Bucs taking an edge rusher in the first round is not the problem. If they take one, fine, great, cool. Can't wait to talk about it. That guy isn't going to be a starter right out of the gate, but he will get plenty of snaps, plenty of opportunities as part of this rotation behind Reddick and Yaya Diaby. Reddick's only on a one-year deal, and while the Bucs could re-sign him after this season, it would at least set them up with 4 edge rushers heading into 2026 without counting Reddick returning. But you cannot tell me that the biggest hole on this roster right now isn't linebacker. Servassier Dennis, I know the team is high on him, but he has been situational at best when he was actually healthy enough to be on the field. Anthony Walker was a great depth addition, but neither of those guys is anchoring the middle of your defense the way Levante David did for the next decade. It's just not happening. If you can get that guy in this draft, in Jihad Campbell, you sprint to turn in that draft card. You can't tell me that the lack of depth at corner wasn't the most glaringly obvious problem on the defense in 2024. Zion McCollum dealt with injuries. Jamel Dean always deals with injuries. Tyke Smith missed time. Christian Izzian missed time. You can even go back to the safeties. Antoine was hurt all season long. Mike Edwards was signed off the street and immediately got hurt. Jordan Whitehead dealt with injuries and self-inflicted wounds. Secondary and linebacker are flat out bigger needs than the edge rush position is right now. That does not mean that the Bucs have to take those positions first. I've talked numerous times and done dozens of mocks now where I take edge first because of the value at other positions later. But I can promise you this. If I'm not trading down and I have the choice between Jihad Campbell and the fourth or fifth best edge rusher in this class at 19, I'm taking Campbell. If I have to choose between Campbell and Jahdae Barron, I'm probably taking Campbell, but that one's a little bit tougher. If I'm deciding between Campbell and Malachi Starks, I'm taking Campbell. The moral of this story is take the best player available at a position of need. You are not getting a better player at 19 than Campbell compared to all the other linebackers in this draft. So while I don't have a problem with the player that Arthur gave the Bucs, I have a big problem with the reasoning and the path that it took to get there. I've talked about James Pierce and how I think he's going to be a really good edge rusher in the NFL in the right situation because of the potential character concerns. We've talked about Donovan Ezeraku. We've talked about all these different edge rushers that the Bucs, Michael Williams, all these different guys that the Bucs could potentially take at 19. Those edge rushers are not as good at their position as Jihad Campbell or Malachi Starks are at theirs. And that's the long and the short of it. So if you're going to tell me that I can take, Donovan Ezeraku, who I like, I think he's really good, or I can take the unquestioned best linebacker in this draft. Injury concerns, off to the side. I'm taking the single best player at a position that the Buccaneers desperately need to address because that's how you build championship rosters. You have the potential to get other edge rushers later on. Is the difference between Jihad Campbell and Jack Sawyer that different than Mike Green and Jeffrey Bassa? Yes, it is. Because Jihad Campbell, and I love Jeffrey Bassa. I've talked about him a lot on this show too. But Jihad Campbell is so much better than Bassa. It does not make up for the fact that even though Ezeraku is better than Sawyer, that gap isn't nearly as large. An interesting 4-round mock from someone a lot of Bucs fans are probably familiar with. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of Locked On Bucs podcast, and Luke Easterling of Athlon Sports did a 4-round mock draft, and things got real interesting for the Bucs right out of the gate. So Easterling has the Bucs trading out of 19 all the way back to pick 31 because the Kansas City Chiefs wanted to jump a bunch of teams ahead of them to take an offensive tackle. So they gave the Bucs second and fourth round picks in order to move up 12 spots. That gives Jason Licht a lot more ammo. And at 31, the Bucs take Jihad Campbell. Easterling says, quote, after moving down and grabbing an extra second round pick and an extra fourth round pick, the Bucs are still able to fill one of their biggest needs with the top prospect in this year's class at the position. Offseason shoulder surgery will impact Campbell's availability throughout the offseason, but once he's back to full strength, he could prove to be a bargain. The new running mate and eventual successor to future Hall of Famer Lavonte David, end quote. In the second, the Bucs land cornerback Darian Porter, the Iowa State product, at pick 53, and then Princely Umanmielen, the edge rusher from Ole Miss, at 63. I'm sorry, Old Dominion. In the third, they get Penn State safety Kevin Winston Jr. at 84. And real quick, before I continue to run through this mock, Kevin Winston Jr. is a player that I've not talked about on this show a lot, and he's a very intriguing prospect. This is a safety that is going way later than he should because an injury derailed his 2024 season at Penn State. We're probably talking about him in the early to mid second versus all the way back here towards the bottom third of the third round. So that could be a sneaky good pick for whoever ends up landing him. David Harrison and I were actually talking about him about a week or so ago, and we both really like him a lot. We were talking about Ransom and Makuba, and then we both kind of brought up Winston Jr. at the same time. We're like, this kid could be something special and could be a major steal for whoever takes him if he fully recovers from his knee injury. But continuing on with Luke Easterling's mock, in the fourth round, he has the Bucs getting Clemson linebacker Barrett Carter at pick 121, and then Louisville cornerback Quincy Riley at 133. So moving down 12 spots, you end up getting the guy that you probably would have taken at 19, while picking up two more picks, one in day 2, one in day 3. Mwah, chef's kiss, Luke. That is the thing of absolute beauty. And through the first 4 rounds, they get 2 linebackers, 2 corners, an edge rusher, and a safety. That's not too shabby. Now, I will say I probably would have gone with Maryland receiver Ty Felton over linebacker Barrett Carter at 121. Felton went the very next pick to the Denver Broncos. I've talked about Ty Felton on this show a couple of different times during some of these mock drafts. I don't really see the need to double up on linebacker here. When you can get a weapon for the offense in this spot, you already got Jahad Campbell. So now you have a solid set of 4 linebackers ready to go. You can bring in an undrafted free agent. You can draft a guy in the 5th or the 7th round. You can, have a linebacker on the practice squad, but you got your 4, and that's really what you need. I didn't like doubling up on linebacker. You can double up on a couple of positions in this draft. You can double up on corner. You can double up on safety. You can double up on edge rusher. I don't like the idea of doubling up on linebacker, especially when Carter isn't really that super versatile guy. Like I've talked about Notre Dame linebacker Jack Kaiser, right? And I've talked about him because he is more of a Swiss Army knife on the defense. He can line up at inside linebacker. He can line up at edge. He can line up at slot. He can line up at safety. He can line up all over the place. That I would understand a little bit more than just a pure off-ball linebacker when you already have your depth pieces in place. Maybe in this particular mock, you could have even gone with Ohio State running back Quinshon Judkins with that extra second instead of Umanmielen. And I realize that changes the dynamic at edge rusher since none of the other picks were edge rushers. That wasn't a position he doubled up with. But those are a couple of names that jumped out that I liked around some of those extra picks that he had the Bucs pick up in that trade with the Chiefs. Running back's another one. You could see the Bucs take one on day 2. You could see them take one on day 3. You could see them address it in undrafted free agency like they did with Sean Tucker to round out that running back room. But Judkins he would be an incredible addition. He really would. You also have to think about the fact that Bucky is your RB1. Rashad is in a contract year. Is he going to want to return and continue to play second fiddle to Bucky Irving? How's that dynamic going to work? You start to develop the next guy in line. and then address running back again in the next draft so that you can round out the room if Rashad leaves and all those different situations come into mind. But overall, I really like this mock. I'm not going to love trying not to trip up over the name Princely Umanmielen every show for the next 4 years if the Bucs end up drafting him. I'm honestly not even sure if I'm pronouncing that last name 100% right, but I'm doing my best. Some of these names are really tough, but I do generally like the plan here from Luke Easterling to get starting caliber players into day 3 while making sure that some of these big needs were addressed. I don't love the fact that he took Darian Porter over Benjamin Morrison, but that's a me problem. I'm not going to argue about it with Luke. Porter is a fantastic prospect. I like him a lot. We talked about him, real early in the draft process. He was a guy that I was targeting a lot in the second round in these early mock drafts that I did during the offseason. We just all have our preferences. And I know, shout out to the guys at Joe Bucs Fan. I always enjoy chatting with them. Steve and I, anytime we cross paths, we always sit and chat for a while. I think I chatted with Steve and Lee at the Combine for probably a solid 20 or 30 minutes. Really enjoyed talking with those guys, but they had something on their site on, I believe it was Thursday, talking about how they wouldn't take Benjamin Morrison until the third round. That if he fell to the Bucs in the fourth, or not in the third round, on the third day, if he fell to the Bucs in the fourth round, they would scoop him up, but they wouldn't take him on day 2. And I wholeheartedly disagree. Their concern comes from the injuries. Morrison had shoulder surgery. He had hip surgery. He missed time in college. And, their argument, and I understand it 100%. It's the same thing that I've brought up in the past. If you're looking to replace Jamel Dean, why would you replace him with someone that's constantly injured? To me, these were not nagging injuries. These were more fluke injuries, more along the Chris Godwin lines than they are the Jamel Dean or the Carlton Davis lines. But, I get it. We all have our preferences. I know what I've seen from Benjamin Morrison. I know what he's capable of. I know how he would fit in Todd Bowles' defense, and I just love that fit so much that he's my guy. He's the one I'll stand on the table for. Other people don't see it. That's why the draft is the draft. That's why Jason Licht and Greeny and Todd and all these scouts get paid the way that they do to be able to make those decisions. And again, you're going to be hard-pressed to find anybody in the NFL that has been more consistently successful in the draft over the course of the last few years than Jason Licht and his staff. So if they pass on Morrison, I'm going to assume it's for a pretty darn good reason. I'm going to trust it. I'm going to, trust the evaluations. I'm going to, trust the process. Doesn't mean I won't be a little bummed. Doesn't mean I won't be a little disappointed. As long as he doesn't end up in the NFC South and torture the Buccaneers for the next, 5 to 10 years, okay, fine. But, that's why we go through all these exercises. That's why we go through all these different names, and we try to get as many varying views and opinions as humanly possible. And just because I disagree with someone doesn't mean that I don't feel that their opinion or their evaluation isn't valid. So if you guys disagree with me about, any of the prospects that I've talked about, you don't want to touch James Pierce because of the concerns, I get it. You don't want to touch Benjamin Morrison because of the injury history, I get it. But that doesn't mean we don't, all want the same thing at the end of the day, and that's for the Bucs to continue to build a championship caliber roster. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you don't want to become an insider, but you do want to do something to help the show, please leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help me out. It helps other people find the show, and we can continue to grow this family of ours that we have. And of course, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.